Hi, I'm Doug Naylor, writer-director of Red Dwarf Back to Earth, and I'll be boring you to death over the next 70 minutes trying to remember some of the things that happened during the making of Red Dwarf Back to Earth. Okay, so this is the opening titles, which was harder than usual because generally we have 3-4 hours of material that we can put together in a montage, and this time it was just 70 odd minutes, and a lot of the material we couldn't use because it would have ruined the plot, so that was a tough build. Here we are 9 years later. Very difficult decision. Do we spend 25 minutes explaining what happened at the end of season 8, or do we leave that for another day? We decided to leave it for another day and crack on with the story, especially as the show was only going to be 23 minutes. This is one of my favourite shots in the whole show. Instead of pulling out of the F as in the original opening titles, we push in. And originally here, Craig said he was able to juggle fruit and eat it. So in the original version of this, he was juggling 2 apples, eating one of them, as well as a tomato. But he came over a bit like Circus Boy. So and we just didn't quite do what the scene needed him to do, so we dropped it.
You can take that look off your face for a start.
Here we are in the sleeping quarters with a live moving scutter. The audience mostly missed that V-flick, so we've re-rendered it for the, what's laughingly called the director's cut. I mean, it's the director's cut only in that I never really intended this to go out as 23 minutes because it's a single story and it doesn't really help in terms of clarity or do the story justice having to split it up in 23 minutes, but that was the Dave commission. I mean, as many of you know, it was originally 2 shows, but Dave wanted 3 and we were desperately trying to deliver 3, and that evolved really during the writing process and pre-production.
Didn't you read his postcard? I was loving it. Unscrewed his head.
So here it is, all together as one piece.
It's having the time of his life.
And the scudder there was made by a guy called Matt Leonard, who's one of Mike Seymour's guys, and his fee for making the scudder, as I'm sure a lot of people know, was a signed copy of the script. So it just shows, you know, how fortunate we are to have people who want to work on the show that badly and are so good. So thanks, Matt. You did such a great job, dude. So here we go. Here's Lister doing the sneeze. This is really difficult to make it not completely grotesque, because Craig was kind of going for the grotesque, and there was lots of you couldn't see anything, but it was really pretty mucusy. So in fact, in the performance, I really tried to clean it up, and then we went to town in the dub and made it kind of wet, but clean wet. And certainly in the premiere screening, it got a massive sort of half huge laugh and half huge groan, which I think was always the reaction we expected. We've also made a couple of Titans in this scene for the director's cut, and also a few Titans in the next sleeping quarters scene. Basically, for reasons of pacing, it wasn't really that the performances or the lines didn't particularly work. It was just I was impatient to hurry the story along. The original idea was that we meet the guys when they're all isolated from one another. They're leading meaningless lives, you know, Lister ironing sneezes, Rimmer framing his old certificates, and that they've just got kind of separated and isolated, and the story was really about how they come together and get back in touch with themselves as members of a team. I know some people will argue that in director's cuts they're supposed to be longer with added scenes, but in fact there are a couple of precedents. Close Encounters, I think, is shorter, director's cut, and also Alien. So we're in good company. And all my life I've always maintained it's not about length, it's about quality. We meet the crew who are all unhappy for a variety of reasons. Lister's mourning the death of Kachansky. Their relationships clearly developed over the last 9 years. This is a beautiful shot, one of my favourite shots in the whole piece. All we had there was a wooden floor, and the rest was green screen, and I did CGI with Mike and the gang. We go down there as Mel Bibby, the original production designer. We added his photograph.
I thought I'd read you another book. It's one of those stupid ones you used to really like.
Originally, when he did it, it was kind of tight-lipped and he was a bit sad. It was a bit like opening game of the season, Liverpool draw 0-0 with Fulham. I did tell him it was a bit like he was mourning the death of his gran, and it would be he needed to do more. Having said that, I wasn't expecting this. The old tear. That really sort of stunned us all. And changed Danny's entrance. He wasn't going to come in quite like that with a look up.
Tell him. I'm walking through the cargo deck, right?
Sleeping quarters, obviously a new build. Trying to keep all the best features of the original sleeping quarters. The ocean grey, or is it military grey? Had about 7 or 8 meetings, and at each of the meetings I kept saying, and I want a revision timetable on the bottom bunk. That's really, really important. And they had a list of about 100 things they needed to do. And I remember walking around the set with Mark Harris, the production designer, and he said, Doug, you know, we have to have a list of, you know, things that we can achieve. There are a list of we just haven't got time or money. And the revision timetable, I'm not sure we're going to be able to do everything. I looked at him and went, forget the sleeping quarters, just give me the revision timetable. We need the revision timetable. We can't have the sleeping quarters without the revision timetable. You don't understand how important it is. Please give me the revision timetable. Originally, it was going to be a translight. We were going to use translights quite a lot, which are basically transparent diagrams, and you put light through the back of them. They use them a lot in Battlestar Galactica. And in fact, originally the big table was supposed to be full of them, but they didn't. They ran out of money and time and weren't able to put lights through those things on the table. So that didn't happen.
But a sea monster in the water tank, that's not right. We're in deep space. Holidays!
Here comes Crichton. Originally, Robert Llewellyn wasn't going to be available for the first week of shooting. And it's really frustrating when that kind of message comes in and then it turns out not to be true, because that's why Robert wasn't in it. In fact, in the original draft, he wasn't even in this scene because it was believed he was going to be in Alaska.
It's a disaster. Oh, my back. Oh, I'm one giant tension knot. Someone pummeled my dials.
The outfits, we did screen tests on them all to see how they looked. Because we were shooting on Red Ones for the first time, which is sort of like super HD. Red Ones have 4K resolution, which is 4 times more than HD resolution. So we were the first British show, in fact, I understand, to shoot on Red Ones. And they give you a huge number of advantages. For a start, it means you can zoom into the picture without losing any quality because there's much more there to start with. You can reframe, make a one-shot out of a two-shot, single out of a medium close-up, and there's some digital zooms that we'll look at later on in the Rimmer Katerina scene. Also, it's better for green screen, great in low light, candlelight, neons, torchlight, all of which I wrote in to take advantage of it. And slow-mo, 120 frames per second is just a flick of a switch. And also, unlike digi-beta cameras, you can use film lenses, so you can get that out-of-focus background and in-focus face cinematic look, which I was really wanted to try and, you know, make the thing look as good as possible.
Nobody bosses Mr. C around, buddy.
One of the first piece of red footage I saw was on the internet, on the Vimeo site. And it was one of the first little films that had been submitted to the Red Users group. It was a skateboarding video, these kids skateboarding down some steps, and the music was a band called Bang Gang. It's All Right, really absolutely beautiful piece. And it was really from seeing that and kind of following the thing through that I really became interested in the Red Ones. Just love that suit.
What?
That was just so incredible. At the premiere, in fact, it got an absolutely gigantic laugh. And when the guys were first in the Bell for the first time, there was a sequence, and God, I wish we'd shot it. They just went into an improv version of Dancing Queen, and it was just unforgettable, just so funny. And in fact, Dancing Queen was where the idea of that outfit came from. For my sins, I was dragged along to see Mamma Mia and fell in love. And I still don't know what those pants are called, where it gets all sort of flary from the knee down. But I thought, God, those are just so cool. We've got, well, cool's maybe not the right word. Unforgettable. We've got to get something like that for Dan. And in fact, in the original script, stupid old me, I had them all in sort of diving suits. And Howard looked at me like, are you insane? Because, in the script, you're not realizing that they're going to be in those outfits throughout, huge, great sequences of the show. I just wasn't thinking. And Howard, said, no, they've all got to have different outfits. So we sat down and talked, and Crichton obviously was a no-brainer, anywhere near swimming, and out come the water wings.
Pictures in my head of you being eaten alive and never being able to get rid of them.
Howard came up with that 1950s, whatever it was, action hero diving suit, which with all the rope and stuff was fantastic. And then my only, part of the Danny thing was the collar and the pants. I didn't expect it to be quite that figure hugging, but hey, Dan pulled it off. So now then, here's a way of saving money. Look at that, isn't that the most amazing CGI squid? How much money must that have cost? Well, in fact, it's not a CGI squid. In fact, it's a real squid. It's a Humboldt squid. It's stock footage. And we coloured it, and we actually put in the tank in the background, or Mike did, and put steps in. But in fact, it's just a piece of nature footage.
Pull us up slowly and quietly.
This set was an interesting one because it was made of wood. And when we battered the guys around in it, and they were being thrashed to death for days, well, certainly 2, being beaten about the face and neck with very, very heavy, actually, tentacles, the set would actually fall apart and would have to be nailed back together. Here we go. You can see it shaking. The whole damn thing is going. This entire sequence was storyboarded, but obviously storyboards are 2D and the real world's 3D, and so there's only so much you can work out. And in a sequence as complex as this, with flying tentacles and the guys all reacting to those tentacles, you kind of have to just wing it on the day and work things out as you go along. I mean, it'd been obviously one of those things that would have really been wonderful to be able to spend a day or so rehearsing. But obviously rehearsing wasn't something that we had the privilege of being able to do with the 14-day schedule. So, I mean, even then, with a sequence like this, it'd be incredibly hard to rehearse. It would probably have draft excluders or something and been whacking one another about the head with them to see what we could have achieved in the Bell. But we didn't have that, and so we basically shot and rehearsed as we kind of went along, with some of the angles worked out. The face wipes were all worked out. Originally, that was going to be across all 3 TVs, going across one way and then turning around and coming all the way back. But for time reasons, that didn't work out.
2 suits in one day. Look at me. Thanks to you, I couldn't even get on the cover of Minga Month.
Here we are, our first introduction to the magnificent G-Deck. This was really, what I think G-Deck always was supposed to be like. This was certainly what was in my head. Something that big, that magnificent, that long. And obviously, there it is. That's what it looks like. That's what it looks like. And obviously, we weren't able to do that in the early series because there wasn't the technology around. And even when we did miniatures, even a big miniature would only be 15, 20 feet. And obviously, you can't get that degree of detail. So we really are in a whole new world here. Here comes Sophie, beaming in. We saw quite a lot of girls. She was recommended by Linda, the casting director, as actually most of the guest people were. And I just looked at some tapes. Sophie was great for a number of reasons. There were actually a lot of East European girls who were very good, but Sophie just was on top of everything. Very funny. Just that you can't define, what that is. It's just funny. So she was able to do the accent, do the lines. Red Dwarf. A smaller Red Dwarf this time. As some of you will know, the original ship that the BBC made back in 1987 committed shelf-aside, hurled itself off a shelf in the BBC Special Effects Workshop and smashed into 1 trillion pieces. And so, apart from those original model shots, we weren't able to make any more, even if we could have afforded to. And in fact, those original model shots we actually tried to find for this. And the BBC couldn't find them, so we had to make a new Red Dwarf ship. And I knew the original long pencil had its critics because it was too long and elegant. I understood really where they were coming from, although I appreciated also the other side of the argument, which was it's a mining ship, and logically it would probably be built like that, the long pencil. But anyway, we investigated how difficult it would be to give the ship a shipectomy, and in fact it was really quite simple. So that was something that Mike and his team did, and everyone appeared to be very pleased with the new shape. A lot of the books, the dressing in the sleeping quarters was brought in by... I brought in all the books. That's Andy's bike, the DOP. He lends us his bike for 2 weeks. In fact, I think he's selling it now on eBay if anyone's interested.
This is your fault.
It doesn't go, of course, but if you want an old, dirty, oily bike, contact Andy if he's not already gone. Oh, talking of things that don't go, there's a small green car that mostly doesn't go and has a very, very special talent for locking itself at the most inconvenient times, which we'll see later on. I should just mention as well that here we are in the sleeping quarters, and it's got a fourth wall, which is the first time it's ever had a fourth wall. Very excited about that. Even when we were looking like we were going to shoot it in front of an audience, I wanted to have this, it might sound a bit weird, have a fourth wall and either shoot it so the audience saw what was happening on the set on studio monitors, or the other alternative idea was to remove the wall opposite the doors and have the cameras coming in there and then flying the wall back, if that was required for that side. Pretty complicated. But the problem was solved when we realised, in fact, that we couldn't afford an audience at all. And the reason we couldn't afford an audience was, there were a number of reasons. One was we just flat out didn't have the rehearsal time. Normally we would have spent 4 or 5 days per show rehearsing it. We didn't have those 4 or 5 days. That would have only left, 2-3 days to shoot everything, which would have been insane. Other reasons, we were able to save money because the studio that we required didn't need to be as big, because it didn't need to fit an audience in as well as all the sets. And the green screen, with all its complexities, often takes a long time to shoot. And we wouldn't have been able really to do that in front of an audience who would have got bored stupid. So the audience had to go. There was really no alternative. Which was, in many ways, very sad, but it was just not practical. I mean, we all always loved the audiences because you get instant feedback. The guys, when they hear the laughs, will milk them more. However, having said that, you only get 2 or 3 shots when the audience is there, because you can't keep, doing it again and again and again in front of the audience because they get bored and it's kind of embarrassing. Whereas you can do more takes when it's single camera that can lead to more rounded, subtle performances.
So, as spoken, I bring Lister back to life, restore drive, so can restart human race, yes?
Now, here we have the scene that we were talking about earlier, which has the digital zoom in it. I remember before when we were talking about when you shoot with 4K that you're able to do zoom into the picture. This is the digital zoom coming up. And so this is basically Katerina humiliating Rimmer. Rimmer really feels small and marginalized. And we can see this. So this was the original picture, and now we're zooming into the original picture. And as you can see, because the resolution is so high, there is absolutely no degradation. And out goes Mr. Rimmer, and in comes his nose again, and out the nose goes. And so you're able to do that kind of thing all the time, reframe, get a single from a two-shot. And when you're shooting as fast as we were shooting, and you don't have the time and the coverage, I mean, that's really the thing that differentiates movies from TV. Their coverage, the number of shots they have, the ability to, put sequences together in the edit, have so much more because they have so much more time. This is a lovely shot. This was shot second unit while I was shooting the Bell. We used anamorphic lenses. I did the shot list, but Mike shot it, and Dean Thrussell, the DIT, also did some bits and pieces. And I really wanted to just get that parallax stuff in, get those beautiful lenses, because that's the other thing about the Red Ones. Although the camera body costs, I think it's $17,000, which is nothing because most decent cameras cost kind of like $250,000. You're able to use prime lenses, which is film lenses. So we're able to get that shallow depth of field and that great filmic look. Oh, should just spend a little time talking about Holly. In my head, I had enough story for 3 shows, but I wasn't sure whether that was going to be possible within the time frame and within the budget that we had. Due to reasons out of my control, I wasn't able to start the scripts until November the 25th. The whole Kuchansky ending was missing, and there was also an idea that although Holly was down at the start, when Katrina arrived, she would fix Holly, and then Holly would create the portal into back to Earth, and then when we discover that the whole thing's caused by the Joy Squid and we return back to Red Dwarf, Holly would obviously no longer be there because Holly was going to be part of the hallucination. So that was the theory. That was swimming around in the ether, but that was only if we were able to do 3 shows as opposed to 2 shows. But I had to be absolutely sure that we could both afford a 3rd show and that we had enough plot for the 3rd show before committing to it. Then Norman, who we had penciled as we had all the cast, called one day and said he absolutely needed to know whether he was in it or not in it, and he needed to know by the end of business that particular day. And of course at that point he wasn't in it, and I couldn't absolutely guarantee he ever was going to be in it. I really needed him just to kind of hang in and trust me. But he decided he'd need to know by the end of that day, and so we had to say, well, at this point, you're not in it. And after that, very sadly, Norman decided he didn't want to be in Red Dwarf anymore, which I think is a great shame.
Well, is it HD ready? It's a version of HD ready.
Great little mic shot there, using Ragdoll's little digital versions of the guys to hang on to the pole. That was on green screen, as was Robert swinging around here. And I'm sure the guys will tell you all about the agonies of being hung on wires and what it does to your stomach muscles. And that was Crichton there on a little, it was kind of like a skateboard on a rope being dragged along. And then Mike and his guys removed the skateboard for us in post. Here comes Danny. Wires, that was just, did your head in trying to work out how to flip Danny. That was a wireman and Mike having a lot of very, very heated conversations. And in fact, I think Mike was almost certain that what he'd been given was completely impossible. And I think he did some VisFX magic to make it work. As he did with all these screens. Now, these screens, Danny coming out of that screen was 20 hours of work. Because all the TV screens, in fact, were obviously not on and didn't have this material on. So every single screen that you see in this whole sequence has a separate shot comped into it.
Just ask the size scan.
So that was just so complex to do. And we had to do that to fit in with the shooting schedule because we weren't able to get the G-Deck stuff, obviously, finished in time to play it in. So we didn't have any choice. Really liked the two performances there from Tom Andrews, the salesman, and Karen Admiral, who turned out to be a massive, massive Blade Runner fan. Were just really good, both of them. Along, obviously, with John Glover, who we know from Spitting Image. Okay, we're coming up to, I think, one of the best special effects in the whole of the show. Certainly one I'm most proud of. You've heard probably there are 260 special vis effects shots done by Mike, and there were certainly probably 40 or 50 done in camera, and this is one of my very, very favourite ones. It's coming up, so I hope you're ready for this. Now, we are about to go into the DVD store, and you will see a lady with red hair, and she's taking a DVD off a shelf and putting it back just there. Now, what actually happened there was, it wasn't a shelf, because we couldn't afford shelves. We didn't have time to make shelves. She put her DVD into a hole that was cut into the wall, and the focus puller took it, handed it to the cameraman handed it to the gaffer, and the gaffer handed it to a runner. So, hey, can Mike match that for a piece of wizardry? I don't think so. Here we are, actually, this is one of my favourite scenes with the guys. I just think they're all just a fab.
Red Dwarf.
And obviously this is the big revelation that the crew are TV characters and cause a lot of distress, and I'm sorry for causing that distress, although if people had read Ganymede and Titan, one of the Red Dwarf forums, I did explain that you would all hate me after show 2. And a lot of you still hate me after show 3, but you particularly hated me after show 2. Because, and I think I've talked about this before, this is just about the worst possible thing you can do to your audience, where basically not only, well, really what you do is you undercut every single episode of Red Dwarf you've ever done, because you're basically saying all that emotional investment that you've made in these characters is all meaningless because they're not real, they didn't have real adventures, they are fictitious characters, and that's going to make your audience really, really mad. But Red Dwarf, I think, has always been a number of things. It has been a comedy show. We've always tried to do cool stories and do vis effects which were, you know, as good as we could ever do at the time. Love that joke with Craig and the Red Dwarf Back to Earth poster. I thought his expression was just priceless. And it was kind of like an emotional roller coaster. It's not just about getting the laughs, it's sort of taking your audience on a journey. And so much television, you just can take or leave it and it doesn't really affect you in any way. Even the people, the Red Dwarf fans who don't like some of the episodes of Red Dwarf, you know, they're not neutral, they're not passive. They really, really hate them, you know, and that's not a bad thing, having that passion. I think it's, you know, we're always trying to, you know, take people to places they haven't been before, in terms of fury, as well as other things.
Track down their creators to plead for more life. How are we going to do that? Easy. Hey, buds, give us more life. I'm pleading with you.
Obviously, we have some ends on here just to fit the ad breaks, and we were able to snip the end off this and just go off Danny's exit line, which was really the intention.
All my life, I've wanted to go on a metaphysical odyssey.
So that helps the story, I think, being able to go off there. Now, this is a mirror of the sleeping quarters. I mean, that's obviously one of the jokes. And if you notice, there's holly leaves up there on the TV monitor. So Holly was in this show. And then we have a regular kind of bunk scene. There they are, sitting around the table. Rimmer's reading his carpet book. Lister, you know, describes what's happened in the toilets. And then later on, there was a scene that was cut from the show, because originally this was going to be the start. When there were only 2 shows, this was going to be the start of show 2. And with there being 2 shows, you obviously had a little more time.
And that's what you did.
And the pacing is different. So I felt that we could have a kind of a bunk type dialogue scene at the beginning of show 2. And this was it. And so there was this little sequence, and then there was a sequence later when Lister describes what happened to a jammy dodger he found down the back of the reading room sofa, and we talk about his relationship with Kachansky, and we hear, and it's kind of an important revelation that, you know, she's way out of his league and he's scum, and, you know, he doesn't really deserve her, which is part of his journey, really, in the show, that he discovers, in fact, he does deserve her, because he's kind of reconnected with his self-belief, which is really what this story's about.
I know how we can get money.
Here we go, and we go from the studio set there back to the department store in Kingston, which we shot in the morning. We had to get in there at 7 o'clock, shoot this sequence, the escalator sequence, and then in the original script there was a big montage sequence where Lister is walking through the store, and he sort of sees things that are missing in his life. So he sees kids, a mum pushing a little baby girl in a pram, and there was a sequence there where the little baby gets a load of coffee beans and throws them up in the air. But that we just didn't have time to shoot that. We half started to shoot it, and we just weren't able to get it. We also weren't able to get the tube sequence that I wanted. I was absolutely dying to get a tube sequence where we took the guys out, shot them on the tube for real, with the camera hidden, really long lens, and then just wanted to see what would happen. I wanted to watch people come up to them and them stay in character. I just thought we'd get some really kind of special stuff.
Look, that's me.
Here's Jez. Just one of those great sequences. As soon as we went in to shoot this, the cast just fell about. He was just so funny, and then I stopped it because I was terrified that sometimes if you rehearse something, you kind of lose the magic. So we half rehearsed this, and then it was like, oh my God, everyone's laughing too much, stop, and then we'll just shoot this for real.
We're trying to find out if this is our last show or not.
And obviously this was a shot. It was in Richmond. We had a lot of people outside, cars going past, a lot of people taking photographs of the crew, because most of the crew couldn't actually fit in the shop because the shop was too small. There wasn't room for the crew and the memorabilia. So this was shot incredibly fast, and it was another of those sequences where we had to nail it, and Craig had to get off because he had another thing to do. And there was this sequence I remember particularly, and the sequence at the end with Kachansky where he disappears and goes back over the hill and back into reality. And the taxi's kind of there, standing, ready to go. And we're getting the most incredible performance. But I just know Craig's thinking, bloody hell, I've got to get this. I've got to nail this so quick. I've got to get in the taxi.
Got an H tattooed on his head. It's not like us.
So this was another sequence. I also have to say, I think Craig's performance in this, his reactions to Jez, are just great, and just show the difference between Craig's season 8.5 and just how many laughs he gets. I mean, all the laughs he's getting with no lines.
No.
Yeah, there you go.
Shall I tell you? No.
And it's really good, because in the old days it would be, you know, where are my laughs? I just think it's... In fact, to use this as an example to Nina, who's the little girl on the bus, the first time I saw her, she was in a play, and she played Giggles, somebody or other in the school play. She was some American heiress. And she was really good when she had lines, and when she didn't have lines, she was kind of looking around the audience, waving at people she knew. I mean, obviously, you know, Craig never did that. Well, only a bit. And I said, you got to look at Craig in this sequence, and that's good acting, that. So, and Jez was just fabulous in this.
Oh, also, I should take the opportunity here to explain about the season 9 thing. During the press and publicity, I said there wasn't going to be a season 9, but there might be a season 10. And there have been about 15,000 theories as to what I meant by that. And what I meant by that was the reference in this scene where he talks about season 9 being completely awesome and the best season ever and blah, blah, blah. And so obviously what I meant was that I'm going to do a season 9 and just skip on to season 10. So it was just a throwaway joke, but it's all been taken rather seriously. Should also mention, as we are about to come into a Mike Seymour special with a Blade Runner enhancement sequence, just how Mike came on board. We met when I was out in Australia. When it appeared, we'd raised the money for the movie, and I was looking at a place to shoot out there in the studios. And Mike worked for a company called Digital Pictures, who made a biz for the Viz effects, and he won the bid, and we've remained in touch ever since. And I just contacted him to pick his brains about the Red Ones at one point, and to talk about various other techniques, and whether he thought they were possible on our budget. And then it became clear that he wanted to work on the show, and work on the show he did. Also, it was around about this time I came across a gentleman known as the Duke. I was on the Gold Coast. In fact, we were in the middle of a production meeting that Mike was involved in, looking at the movie, going through it shot by shot, trying to work out how to do everything. And the money was there and promised, but wasn't actually completely concrete, although it had been promised, and it was just, it will definitely be there in 4 weeks, so you get out there and start working already, and don't you worry about the money. The office back in London called and said a gentleman had called them from Australia, and he wanted to speak to me, and would I call him because he wanted to invest in the Red Dwarf film. And I called him, and he said he just pulled out of a film that was going to be starring Will Smith called I Am Legend. This is about 5 years before I Am Legend was released, because he wasn't quite happy with Will Smith in the part. And a little bell went off in my head, thinking, that's a very strange decision. But anyway, we're going to ignore it, because he said, I want to put money into the Red Dwarf movie. And I said, how much were you thinking of? And he said, well, I've got, now that I'm not involved in the I Am Legend thing, I've got about £60 million, 150 million Australian. And he said, I don't know whether you need all of that or whether you want part of it. And so I picked myself up off the floor and said, well, we wouldn't need anywhere near all that, but, well, I mean, you could, that'd be brilliant. So he said, well, look, let's meet. I'm really, really a huge Red Dwarf fan. Can I come and stay with you in your apartment? And I went, no, because there isn't room. And he went, well, okay. I said, stay in a hotel, be fine, and, you know. And he said, okay, and who's going to pay for my airfare? And I said, well, you're the guy with the 60 million, why don't you pay for it? He said, it's just for tax reasons, it makes it really, it's okay, fine, don't worry about it, I'll pay for it. So by this time I'm thinking this guy is a faker. So I said, look, why don't you speak to the producer? The producer can sort out the bits and pieces, and then we'll take it from there. So he goes, fine. Producer calls me back. Says the guy claims he's got all his money from nobility, and he claims he's the Duke of Manchester. And so I said, well, I'm from Manchester, and there's nobody. The Duke of Manchester doesn't exist. I would have heard of the Duke of Manchester. Just forget it. So anyway, we went out for supper that night, and limos, for some reason, kept arriving and parking near us, and everyone was making jokes about, here comes the Duke, and whatever. So I just thought, this is insane, but I'm just going to call the office in London. And I went, I know the Duke of Manchester doesn't exist, but just go on the internet and just check out the Duke of Manchester. I mean, it's probably a waste of time. They call me back. They go, actually, there is a Duke of Manchester. And his relatives moved to Australia, moved to Melbourne, which is where this guy came from, the turn of the 19th century. And it all seems to make sense that he possibly could be the Duke of Manchester, and that he actually does exist. So the producer called him again and said, look, can we just have some evidence that you really are, you know, who you say you are? And he went, well, sure. He said, Kate Blanchett will vouch for me. Would that help? And he went, yeah, sure, yeah. So, well, look, let me give you Kate's number. You call Kate. Kate will tell you, you know, I'm a really good guy, and we'll go from there. And he went, okay, fine. So he gave them this telephone number. Producer called it immediately. He was engaged. So I was thinking, finally got through. And Kate Blanchett, in inverted commas, answered the phone with what sounded like a clothes peg over her nose, and went, hello, Kate Blanchett speaking. And she said, I'm really sorry, but I've got a terrible cold, and I don't really sound like myself today. So the producer goes, yeah, cheers, thanks very much. And we just stopped wasting our time. We're trying to get a movie made here. Bang, the phone goes down. The Duke calls a couple of days later and goes, "What's happening? Didn't you get on with Kate? Kate's really upset. I was hoping to get Kate in as the main baddie, and, you know, you didn't treat her well, and I don't think we're ever going to get Kate back." So the producer goes, "Are you insane? Do you really think I'm stupid?" He goes, "Look, I really do have this money. I really am the Duke of Manchester. I swear I will prove it to you. I will send you my bank statement. Okay, I will fax through my bank statement and it will prove I've got, well, in fact, I've got more than £60 million in my bank account, but you're not having all of that because I need some of that for other projects." So an hour later, the fax comes through, 200 million, I think it was dollars, Australian dollars, comes through. And he'd just taken his own bank statement and Tipex things out and put numbers and zeros. And that's what you're dealing with when you're trying to make a movie. You know, there was also another time where the guy said, "Look, I know you've been really, really messed about. I promise you I will not mess you about. I can provide 70% with tax incentive funds and blah, blah, blah. And I promise you I won't mess you about." And then a few days later he called me back and said, "I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to drop out." And it turned out he had to drop out because he was going to prison. So it was round about then I thought, time to move on.
Fair enough. Come on, we haven't got all day.
She didn't see that coming, did she?
Here we are, we're going down to Noseworld, which is obviously related to the Blade Runner iWorld. And we're going down the studio steps, which was one of Andrew Allard's suggestions, and also among many very fine suggestions he made. Great script notes. Thank you, Andrew. And we go down and we meet Richard Wu playing Swallow, or as he was called in Blade Runner, Chew. I did contemplate for a very brief second calling him Achu, but you'd be grateful to know I changed my mind on that and didn't. Kept having problems here with the test tubes. They're either too noisy or they went out, so we had to reshoot this several times. But again, you know, with so little shooting time and so little money, you really can't tell there's next to no set, because it's really all test tubes and tight shots and not much else. Bit of frosting.
Need answers. How many episodes have we got left? Is it true we're going to die?
I don't know that stuff. I just do noses. Latex.
Who does know?
Should just mention here that the set dresser, Jane Gilchrist, pretty well did all this set and the test tubes all herself. Took a couple of days, and we hired them from a company called Bob's Bits. And Bob's Bits basically hires weird science fiction nuts and bolts and test tubes and weird futuristic looking stuff to the film industry, and we used that over and over again throughout the show.
You said before you stole a car.
Okay, coming up very, very soon is we meet Carbug for the first time, which was I was hoping to be one of the biggest gags in the show, but obviously the press got to us first, and it was in all the papers, and everything was completely blown. But hey, that was our fault for not keeping it more protected. We should have had it under a green sheet like that all the time. I always wanted it to be a smart car. In fact, I even took my son into a car showroom and asked the dealer if he could sit in the back and I could take some photographs. I wasn't, you know, I didn't care what the car was like. It was what the seating room was like in the boot. And it turned out in the end, much to my chagrin, that in fact we couldn't afford it for the production. It was too much, even though it was only a few £1,000s, and that they were recommending I got a Ford car instead, which was like £800. And so I had my heart set on a smart car. I wanted a smart car, so I bought one, which obviously wasn't green, and got it vinyl wrapped. And then Mark stuck plant pots on the back and did all these brilliance. And this is what we ended up with.
Security checks commencing. All personnel in position. Everyone returned from the restroom. Check. Check. All little tables folded away.
Check.
Check. Seatbelts on. Check. Check.
Winkers to shut down, landing gear down.
So here we are, Coronation Street for the first time. People, I think, have kind of accepted, oh, well, Craig, you know, works in Coronation Street, so it's easy to get permission to shoot in Coronation Street. I don't think any other show other than a new show has ever shot on Coronation Street. They were so kind. They were just unbelievably generous and extraordinary. They really, really were. John Whiston and all those guys. John actually used to work on Red Dwarf when we were in BBC Manchester. But just phenomenal. They gave us the whole run of the street. We're able to shoot, exterior, interior, just incredible. And a real first.
Just like where I grew up, except there's
You know, people from Manchester, just the best. They really are. So here we go. This is the first day of the shoot, in fact. Robert's, this is the first mask he's wearing, Simon Gregson. As we later discover, this is the second show he's done in his career, Coronation Street being the first. He was just fabulous.
That's me, where are you?
Just worked so well with the guys. It was like he'd been, with us for ages. Really good. Probably not the kindest shot for Robert's eyes on the first day. I'm sure makeup absolutely bloody hated me. Not for the first time.
Vandals have stolen the droid's entire hard drive.
And now we're about to go over to the cabin, and this was the very last thing we shot on this day. The very first thing we shot was coming off the Coronation Street sign, and we were supposed to shoot carbug bombing down the street, except we couldn't because the keys had mysteriously locked themselves in the car. So this sequence had to be done in about 15 minutes, the one we're about to see in a second.
Those magazines the photograph was taken at the beginning of the shoot, and then the magazines were made during the day, and then this is why this is shot last, so the magazines could be finished. So this was the pressure on the guys to get this, and sometimes when you have a lot of pressure, it kind of messes with your brain, so you can't remember anything, because it's like you can't afford not to remember it. We've got to go 10 minutes, that's all we've got. So poor old Robert here really struggled a few times with his lines. And Michelle, in the end, we had one take. So everything we do on Michelle is her first and only take, which she nailed absolutely brilliantly. And here we go, off to the Rovers.
And here's an interesting thing. I mean, when they shoot Coronation Street, they shoot about 36 pages a day. When we shoot Red Dwarf, we shoot about 5.5 pages a day, and I think that's good. And one of the reasons they're able to do that is the lighting is worked out. They flick a switch, the lighting goes on, and you don't need to tweak it. And they know how best to shoot Coronation Street. There are, 4 or 5 camera positions, and that's it. That's where you have to put your cameras. You don't do anything fancy. You don't do moving camera. It's mainly static with little pushes. And they're then able to get that incredible speed and turnover that they need. But that's a real strange situation for Craig, for being used to shooting that quickly, and then he comes into this with green screen and tweaking and lighting and all the paraphernalia that goes with shooting CGI. It couldn't be a bigger contrast.
I know you don't exist. Okay, no.
This is all first day, so it was all kind of fits in really well. But sometimes first days are always a bit difficult as people kind of get the bearings on what they're doing, and we were doing just so much. There was no time for that. We just had to get on with it. I think Chrissy's hair changes a little bit as well. It's flatter on this opening day. It gets a bit higher and bouncier later on, and more rimmery. But having said that, I mean, something we haven't mentioned is just how damn good the guys look. Those makeup girls, they're just amazing. And now we're about to go to a matte painting. And Mike is a huge fan of matte paintings, as I am now. And he always says that you get an incredible production value out of a really good matte painting. And this is the one where he went on the London Eye with about 8 cameras and was told he wasn't allowed to have all the cameras because he looked a bit too professional. There it was, it just flashed past in 5 seconds. And there's the second one he did in Australia. And here we go. We're about to meet the Munchkins. This is shot at Shepperton in the old house, using the same 40 candles which we use over and over and over again. And we're about to meet Richard O'Callaghan, who played the part of Hoagie the Rogie when we did the read-through of the Red Dwarf movie. It was absolutely hilarious. And the cast just absolutely adored him. Completely different character to the one he's about to play here. So really just going back to what we were saying before about this is one story, not three separate stories, and the pacing of each of the three parts obviously is different, because that's what happens, you know, first act, second act, third act. But I think when it's put together, hopefully the pacing of it works. But what tended to happen when it first went out, people would analyse, oh, I prefer show 1 to show 2, show 2 is funnier than show 1, or whatever. Whereas it was never intended to be three parts like that. It's one story, and they obviously have different characteristics.
Once it's established.
And that's really back to that whole thing about, can you tell a Red Dwarf story in 23 minutes? And you could do Red Dwarf scenes in 23 minutes, but could you tell a typical Red Dwarf story? And I'm convinced you can't. Not anything of any kind of complexity. In fact, I was reminded of a story about Galton and Simpson, who wrote Hancock and Steptoe years ago, when the BBC wanting them to write, instead of 30-minute normal regular BBC shows, they wanted them to write 25-minute shows because it was an easier sale to America. And Galton and Simpson saying they couldn't write Steptoe's 25 minutes. The extra 5 minutes made all the difference in terms of the complexity of the story. Which is just interesting, because on top of that, because we've got science fiction, we've got the whole problem of exposition. And with science fiction, there's often so much to explain, and you can't do it in an abbreviated form that people understand. I mean, it's like the joy squid. You have to explain what a joy squid is because it's something that's been created. Whereas if it were a contemporary comedy, you could talk about someone having malaria, and then you wouldn't have to go into massive detail about, you know, what causes malaria and the effect of malaria and whatever. You could do it in a much more shorthand form, and that's the joy of science fiction, that you're able to make things up. But also the difficulty is that often it requires a lot of explanation and setup before you can have the fun. Here we have the death chase, the Chinatown sequence. There's people with neons again. We shot these two sequences so quickly. It was basically an afternoon, the glass sequence coming up. It was sugar glass, and we had only enough panes for one take, because the original panes, they're so fragile. They just detonated within seconds of being put in. So this is all done in one take, 3 cameras. Took about 40 seconds to shoot, and that was it. Slow-mo, 120 frames per second again. One of the great benefits of the Red camera. And obviously the Chinatown sequence, again, was shot, I think, 2 hours. We just, you know, had the camera on tracks and all those neons, and it just looks so cool, I think. Great job by Andy Martin, the DOP, and beautifully edited by Nick Ames. And back we go. Move the candles. This sequence coming up now used to contain the Jammy Dodger sequence, which was one of the deleted scenes, which was cut, but originally was supposed to illustrate the guys acting as a team, as opposed to the way the show had started, with them all being disparate. Nice catch from the cat, dropping in from above, making it look like it flicked across. Also, maybe here's a good
point to talk about Blade Runner, which was one of the films that most influenced Rob and I in the early days when we were trying to create Red Dwarf, along with Dog Star and Alien and Silent Running. And for the 21st anniversary, it just seemed fitting to revisit some of those areas. And there were certainly story parallels with the search for the creator. And I also thought no one's really done a homage to Blade Runner yet. It's such a wonderfully fabulous film and, you know, greatly, greatly loved. Doesn't ever seem to date. And many of the Red Dwarf fans, you know, are also massive, massive Blade Runner fans. So I thought that might be a fun thing to do because they would get all the jokes. And also, I wanted something, a kind of dreamlike quality. So when we first come out of the portal, it appears to be a world very much like our own. But then as we get into the Blade Runner homage, it becomes clear it's not our world, and that this is a world that's being manipulated by a higher force. And so that was one of the things I wanted to do, and felt that homage part would help.
I never thought I had responsibility to anyone. I never thought there was anyone out there who was on...
Here's when was the last time a comedy show, the two leads both murder someone? That's got to be a first, hasn't it? Even if it turns out they don't actually murder someone. So here comes Lister's heartfelt speech about how he's just growing old and fat. Don't know where I got an idea like that from.
Sitcom and a biscuit.
Great sound effects here. I have to say as well, Mark Owen, this isn't really his finest work in this scene, but the bell and the dubbing mixer the job he did was just awesome. I thought absolutely awesome. Yet another beautifully lit scene by Andy, and yet another set which doesn't have any walls, just black drapes for this one. Polythene sheets for Noseworld, and just blackness for the cardboard garage. A lot of the corridors were green screen, so they're CGI walls. Now that looks quite a simple little sequence, doesn't it? Put some paper on the fire, and it burns. I think that took 40 minutes, that. And in fact, the paper kept falling out, setting fire to things, not burning, and then actually, if you have a look, the script's got the supervising art director's name on it, so not quite what we wanted, but hey, love that vase, that's brilliant. Now that was done with real vase there, CGI vase on the table, so you sweep away the CGI vase, the real vase is on a green stick, which you remove. It's attached to the green stick with a bit of blue tack, and then Rimmer picks up the real vase, throws it to Danny, who catches it. Danny palms it so he doesn't throw it over his shoulder, and then we have a CGI vase whizzing through the air and hitting the creator on the head, although it doesn't because it's been palmed, because you can't see it. And we do the rest with a sound effect.
Hey, witch me, baby, just witch me. He controls the world. He can do
Also, maybe this is a good place to talk about metafiction and removal of the fourth wall. Oh, this is great. I love Christy in this. This is great fun to shoot this as well, because there was so much crew and cast laughter. And we weren't sure whether this rake thing, which was going to work, and obviously this is Lister's sense of humour. Lister punishing Crichton because subconsciously he knows about Kachansky still being alive because he believes the kids. And he knows Crichton hasn't told him to protect him, but he ain't happy deep down in his subconscious. So he's basically, you know, making everyone suffer. It's his dark side or his grey side that we're seeing here.
Hey, I'm not typing this, guys. What's happened? Well, maybe it's not the
And then here we go. Danny's with his
Maybe it's something else. What is it with these damn things?
origami.
Why do I keep making
And another mic effect coming up here.
What actually is it, sir?
In fact, looking back on this, we should have made these probably look like red dwarfs, and then red dwarfs turn into... I know some people thought they were red dwarfs, but they were sort of naught. And then there we go, it's the squid.
It looks like a squid. Why'd I be making squids?
That's something else that controls the world. How about it's our combined subconscious?
Like the time we were ambushed by the despair squid?
There we go. So it could have been a number of things to explain away and restore the fourth wall. I felt because it was a kind of 21st anniversary show, there was a sort of coolness in using one of our most loved shows and revisiting it. I didn't think people would go, oh, you just can't think of any ideas. Just proves them. There's Crichton's White of Crichton's Eyes that we did in the grade.
Kids.
Love the performances here. These are great.
But in the real world,
This is comedy drama we're in now, and you can't do this so easily in a sitcom.
not in your heart. I've got no option, Crichton.
You know, we're seeing different sides. I mean, that's Crichton doing drama there.
Miss Kachansky's.
Just want to go back and talk about the fourth wall. The fourth wall, for those that don't know, is that invisible wall between the characters and the audience. In literature, it's called metafiction, and it's a genre that's existed since the 9th century, and it's also been done, you know, in more recent times by people like Woody Allen in Purple Rose of Cairo, and Mel Brooks in Spaceballs, and Robin Hood, and Blazing Saddles, and obviously Pirandello. 6 characters in search of an author. But what I thought it would give us is it would be almost like just landing on an alien world with different laws and different rules. And as a consequence, there would be a cataclysmic emotional response from our characters because it would affect them all fundamentally, as fundamentally as a backwards world or any kind of weird alien environment. And that was really what I was interested in, basically to play their emotional character responses to the situation, but all the time knowing that the fourth wall would have to be restored because otherwise it undermines everything that we've ever done and every story we've ever made about the gang. Here comes Chloe, who said we couldn't keep secrets. That's fantastic entrance. I just think that's so cool. Coming in out of focus. And it was, while they were lining up the shot, I saw the shot out of focus like that. Just because that's where the camera was, and they were going to change the lens. And I said, no, please, let's have a walk in. Because we were going to do our entrance quite differently. And I just thought it was such a dramatic entrance because you weren't quite sure what you were getting. And this is Craig, and fantastic little scene here. A lot of people in the edit actually came in to see this, and there was a deafening silence. And I thought, oh my God, it's so bad. And then there was a lot of snuffling and nose blowing. So then obviously we shot this different sequence at a place called Kinetic. And this is the sequence where Craig's got to scream off and run for his cab. I think Chloe's absolutely fantastic here. Just great. In fact, it's a great sequence. Both of them are brilliant. And she's just so kind of not real and not quite in the original sequence, and she's slightly more human here without being real and human. Just perfect for the part.
I thought that too, but...
And this callback from Lister.
You were right.
No.
I'm sure he's been cooler, but I can't remember when.
I don't take any smeg. And even though I'm disgusting, sometimes I can be quite brave.
You'll never get me.
And again, out of focus exit to mirror and also the trees there, the evergreens for the Kachansky side, and the dead trees for Lister. And we're back to G-Deck, looking very cool. And then little Red Dwarf, we obviously couldn't get in too close to the Red Dwarfs because we didn't have the time or the money or the resolution to be able to do that. And Mike and I spoke right from the start about all the Red Dwarfs would be kind of quite small, which was right for the story because it was about their loneliness in space, and we wanted to get back to that. The four guys in a godless universe had lost the way and had become separated and had all gone off in the separate directions. And now the four are kind of restored as a unit.
Or an aromatherapy luxury nail treatment. What kind of crazy defense mechanism is that?
Well, it's an ingenious one, sir, because it means you stop attacking it. Yeah. And while you're all happy-clappy, she's Garper's right. Precisely,
Here we have the explanation. It turns out Mr. Cat. And also that says, I suppose, a few interesting things about who the man with the H is on his head. Because I think it can only be one person if the cat's explanation is right. So there, that's something to think about, I guess. That's the story to be told later. So here we are in obviously a space lift and not just a pallet with some flashing lights at the back of it. Although it worked very well, I have to say.
Make some happy sea life.
By the way, those doors, we had one set of doors, and those are the doors, and we use them as sleeping quarters in the corridor, and in fact this corridor that you're seeing now is the sleeping quarters reworked with a foreground miniature. Foreground miniature is basically, that is a miniature corridor that's shot so it joins on to the real corridor by using a forced perspective. And it was something, I wanted to use old, classic special effects techniques, and because they're cheap, and we didn't really get to use as many of those as I'd hoped we would. And originally I wanted the dimension cutter to have a similar technique to make it look like it was about 40 yards long, but in the end we weren't able to do that and just went for something much simpler, buying some kids' toy guns and gluing them all together, which is what the dimension cutter was in the end, with a £10 exhaust from Halfords. So if you want to know how to make a dimension cutter, that's what you do. Should just mention for those interested that over the Easter weekend that Back to Earth went out, it was watched by an aggregate audience of 11.44 million, which Dave are quite pleased about. Talking of Dave, how did the show end up on Dave? It ended up on Dave because, as people probably know, we were trying to get the film made for very many years. And one of the things you have to raise finance is a TV deal. And we had a TV deal with the BBC where they agreed to put in, it was almost £1 million for the TV rights. And that's very, very attractive to people investing in the film because they know the film will be seen on TV, and therefore the DVD is likely to sell, and therefore blah, 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 blah. So because it took so long to raise the money, the TV deal lapsed, and then we got all the money together, finally, we thought, and then we went back to the BBC and said, can we have our TV deal back? It's lapsed, blah, blah, blah. And then they said no, because we don't want the Red Dwarf movie anymore. And as a consequence of that, the whole deal fell apart and the money went away. So we contacted Mark Thompson, the Director General. And the thing about the BBC is, it's not just 14 people in a room, it's different individuals, and different individuals have different opinions. And it's kind of like how Red Dwarf, was rejected 3 times because those particular individuals hated it. And then we went to BBC Manchester, and those individuals liked it. So we've got to be careful when we talk about the BBC. It's not the BBC, it's the individual who was head of department at that particular time. Mark Thompson, Director General, heard about the TV deal and said, that's absolutely ridiculous. Of course we should buy the TV rights. Ironically, Mark Thompson was head of BBC Two when season 7 was #1 in the ratings, so we've always had a great relationship with him. He then had to put it out to a committee because he doesn't deal with every single decision, but he said, of course, blah. And then it was that committee, much to his surprise, that said, no, we don't want Red Dwarf anymore. We are no longer interested in the audience that Red Dwarf formerly used to attract. So then, as far as I was concerned, because, it'd been 8 years. Incredible amount of work, 35 rewrites of the script, constantly doing different scripts with different budgets for different people, and still trying to make it so I liked it. I thought, well, that's it, it's dead, move on, do other things. Meantime, several years later, Dave bought all the repeats. The repeats did really, really well. And then they came to us and said,
can we do something to celebrate your 21st anniversary?
And that's really how the whole Dave thing happened. Anyway, that's all for me. Thanks for listening, for the 2 people who are still here. And that's not significant. Don't think that's significant. That's not significant. That isn't. I mean, it really isn't significant.